Yeah.
I laid in Jeff's lap in the last thing.
Let's
Do that.
Just turn me on. Oh, really? There we go. I want my this.
It has like a study.
Gentlemen,
How you
I'm
doing?
actually really honored to kind of sit down with both of you because Midnight Special early this year for you, and now this film, you're having a great year.
Well, thank you very much.
You, Prince of Egypt. No comment. But gentlemen, we're here to talk about Loving, and had an opportunity to see it, I think about 3 weeks, almost a month ago. And I thought, Jeff, you did an amazing job with it, bringing the story together. Very understated. Your performance along Joel, you and Ruth, I thought the chemistry worked really well. What was it, Jeff, about the story, of all the stories, the different types of stories you directed, why did this story kind of resonate and make you think this is one I want to actually tackle as a project?
Well, you know, I think I can say this without much hyperbole. I think this is one of the greatest love stories in American history. I can say that straight-faced because I believe it. I was approached in 2012 with Nancy Bursky's documentary, and when I sat to watch that documentary, that's the first time I heard about Richard and Mildred's story, and that was too late for me to be known about this story. This is something that should be on the lips of every American because it is one of our greatest stories, I feel like. Not to mention it's so important, so relevant. But at the core of it, when I sat and watched that piece that Nancy made, I just fell in love with these people. And more importantly, I felt like I knew them. I felt like I understood where they were coming from. And a big part of that's from me growing up in the South. You know, Richard could have been my grandfather. Mildred, I've never met anybody like Mildred. But that doesn't mean I didn't identify with her. She had this connection to place that was so strong that it would, you know, drive her to move her family back into Virginia to live in hiding under threat of arrest or much, much worse. I understood that because as a Southerner coming from Arkansas, I love that place, but sometimes I can't stand that place. You know, there's this complexity in the relationship of being a Southerner, and obviously I don't feel it the way that Mildred felt it, but I understood that duality. I understood the complexity I felt like.
Now, the fact that you, I would say almost like an important quintessential story, you said you thought it was probably one of the most romantic stories. I think it's also, for our culture, one of the most important stories.
Sure.
And two quintessential British actors in this story.
Yeah.
Joel, I mean, talk a little bit about, I mean, you transformed, morphed into this character, this kind of character from the South.
Yeah.
Talk about your portrayal of Richard Loving.
Well, you know, we had the documentary, Nancy's documentary, as a kind of complete roadmap to, you know, how to create the characters. I mean, you know, I thought when I first got turned on to the story by Jeff, I was shocked that not a lot of people knew about these guys, about Richard and Mildred. And yet, as much as we didn't really have an iconic image, you know, playing a real person, if there's someone super famous, can be, you know, very tricky. So, you know, the question is, do you reach for a really accurate portrayal in terms of the walk and the talk and the full embodiment of a person? And the answer to that always felt yes with this, because we were striving in order, almost out of respect to this couple, to tell their story, a true story, truthfully, as I say. You know, Jeff wasn't going to turn it into some other thing, some other Hollywood thing. So we had the documentary, and Ruth and I would sort of walk around on set, and well in advance of even being on set, listening to the way the two of them spoke, and really studying them in that way, and then hopefully going beyond a kind of a mimicry of them to then find each other, you know, to allow those two characters to fall in love on screen the way we had seen in the documentary, and falling in love with them as the real people that they are.
Now, the thing I found fascinating about the story, and we now live in a culture where you have slogans like "Love is love." When you knock down the barrier of interracial romance in this country, I think that's something, like you said, a lot of people don't really know or understand the genesis of this story. Jeff, you directed it in a way that I thought was very effective and solid, but very understated. Like Joel just said, you didn't bring a lot of pyrotechnics to it. It was just a simple story. Is that kind of how, when you were kind of writing it and conceiving, is that what you saw as well?
Certainly, I mean, if I had written a big histrionic monologue, I just don't know whose mouth I would put it in. I tried to write a story that represented the nature of Richard and Mildred. And as soon as I finished that documentary, I called the producers and said, look, I want to make a film from their point of view. And point of view isn't a casual thing. Point of view is a commitment as a storyteller, for me, because I think stories have to lock into their characters, and then everything that you do from that point on as a storyteller is defined by that decision, where you put the camera, how the scenes play out, and if you've made the decision to stick with Richard and Mildred's point of view, you're not going to go to the Supreme Court, because they didn't go to the Supreme Court, oral arguments. And other things happen. There are other, I think, interesting narrative things that come from that discipline or that decision. If you look at the court case from their point of view, you have this entire, social, political, legal instrument that is carrying the weight of their lives in its hands, and so they have no control over that. They don't understand it fully. They don't know what the outcome's going to be. And then as soon as you put that camera over here and you look at it from a distance, that becomes inherently dramatic to me, because you see these beautiful children that they're making together. You see this life that they're just trying desperately to keep, and it's in threat, and it's the decisions being made by a system they don't fully understand. That to me is dramatic, and it speaks to a much bigger, more important point, which is just the detail of humanity at the center of these things. We can have big conversations about marriage equality. Right. We can have big conversations about racial equality, but in those we always have to remember the people, and people are not. People are, they are of a race, they are of a religion, but they are themselves, and we have to focus on that individuality, I think, to get to the truth.
Now, Joel, I know that in every film, when you are about to take a role, you think about, how best to kind of morph or inhabit that character. But is it more of a responsibility when you're playing a character that there's an actual family that's attached, that's going to be watching for authenticity? Does it feel more significant, I would assume?
It definitely feels more significant. I'm glad you asked that. And it, it on a character, kind of the level of the task of creating the character, it sort of makes it easier if you have access to the real person, because you don't have to think about creating something from nothing. But it definitely puts a pressure on it. It definitely, you start to kind of worry about getting all the aspects right, and then particularly if, as you say, if the family is still around. I will just point out one day where I was on set, and Peggy, the only remaining daughter of Richard and Mildred, living child, was there, and I heard she was on set, and it was the first time I was going to meet her while I was dressed in my costume and looking as her dad. I got very nervous, and I waited till we finished shooting the scene until I went over to say hello to her, and it was very awkward and shy. I was very shy, and then she gave me a big hug and called me daddy.
Wow.
Yeah, it was sort of, it was sort of very special to me, because in many ways, and Jeff and I have talked about it, she's very much like her dad, very quiet. So she doesn't have a lot of words. She's got a lot of thoughts and not a lot to say. But we were kind of happy to get her blessing in various regards, and she felt safe with us, and really started to get comfortable, you know, throughout the process, and I think because she appreciated the way it was being handled.
Well, I think, as I said at the outset, I think you guys, the work in this film is very significant. It's a huge awards contender. It should be. Thank you both for your time.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
All right.
Thanks so much.
And since we're on, well, I haven't turned it off, but Midnight Special was great. I can't believe you got 2 movies in the same year that I love. Joel, I loved all your stuff.
Thank you.
Look, Joe. Hey, man, I'm not being funny. I mean, you know, I have a massive appreciation for the art and what it takes in order to create it. So I think you guys did an amazing job.
Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you. All right.